The smell of salt and steel filled the early morning air as the Navy ship USS Falcon rocked gently in the harbor. The crew moved quickly across the deck, preparing for another long day at sea. Engines rumbled below and sailors shouted commands as gulls circled overhead. Everyone was busy, except for one man who walked slowly up the gangway, carrying nothing but an old duffel bag and a faded cap. Before we dive into video, please subscribe our channel. His name was Samuel Briggs. His hair was white as snow, and his back slightly bent. His uniform was clean but old-fashioned, the kind you didn't see anymore. No one really knew where he came from. He had been assigned as a temporary cook, filling in for someone who had been transferred out suddenly. When the young sailors saw him for the first time, they laughed quietly. "Is this some kind of joke?" one of them whispered. "Man, the old guy looks like he belongs in a museum," another chuckled. Samuel didn't say a word. He simply looked at them with calm eyes and walked past, his boots making soft thuds on the metal floor. Down in the ship's galley, the air was hot and full of noise, pans clanging, meat sizzling, men shouting orders. The young crew worked fast, but it was chaos. The head cook, Petty Officer Grant, looked frustrated when Samuel entered. "You must be the replacement," Grant said with a smirk. "We're not running a retirement home here, old man. You sure you can handle a frying pan?" Samuel only nodded. "I'll manage," he replied quietly. Grant tossed him an apron. "Fine. Just don't burn the place down." The others laughed. By noon, the kitchen was in full swing. The ship's officers were coming for lunch, and tension ran high. Grant barked orders while the young sailors rushed around. But somehow, everything started going wrong. The soup was too salty, the meat overcooked, and the bread burned. That's when Samuel quietly stepped forward. He didn't ask permission. He just took over one station, then another. His hands moved slowly but surely, like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. He adjusted the heat, added just a pinch of salt, stirred the pot with precision. Within minutes, the smell changed, from sharp and burnt to rich and comforting. The others stopped and stared. Even Grant paused. "How did you do that?" he asked, trying not to sound impressed. Samuel just smiled faintly. "Cooking's not about rushing, it's about rhythm," he said softly. But despite his calm, whispers spread across the galley. "Who is he?" "He moves like he's been doing this forever." "Yeah, but he's just an old cook, right?" That night, the ship hit rough waters. The deck shook, and dinner had to be served early. Most of the crew ate quickly and went to their posts, but Samuel stayed behind, cleaning every pot and pan himself. As he worked, Lieutenant Harris, the ship's operations officer, walked in. "You're still here?" Harris asked. Samuel nodded. "Old habits die hard," he said. The lieutenant watched him for a moment. "You've been in the Navy before, haven't you?" Samuel didn't look up. "A long time ago," he replied simply. Something in his tone made Harris curious. "What was your post?" Samuel smiled faintly. "I cooked," he said. But his eyes said more than his words. They were sharp, full of memory. Eyes that had seen things far beyond the kitchen. The next morning, the ship set out for open sea. The crew gathered for breakfast, joking loudly as usual. But when Samuel entered the galley, the laughter turned to silence. He began working quietly again, humming an old tune. The young sailors watched him, uneasy for reasons they couldn't explain. Then came Chief Parker, a strict and proud officer. He frowned when he saw Samuel. "Who approved this man's assignment?" Parker demanded. "I did, sir," Grant said nervously. "He's just a temporary cook." Parker crossed his arms. "Temporary or not, this isn't a cruise ship. We run tight operations here." He walked up to Samuel. "You follow orders, old man. Understood?" Samuel didn't flinch. "Understood, sir," but Parker wasn't satisfied. "And don't act like you're special. You're just here to cook." Samuel said nothing. He simply nodded and continued his work. The crew exchanged nervous glances. There was something strange about how calm he stayed, even under pressure. Later that day, during lunch, something unexpected happened. The ship's communication system suddenly crackled to life. An emergency message coming through. The radar had picked up something unidentified approaching the ship. The alarm sounded. Men ran to their stations. Orders flew across the deck. In the chaos, one young sailor tripped and nearly dropped a tray of hot oil. Samuel caught it just in time. saving the boy from burns. "Careful, son," he said, setting the tray down. "Keep your balance. Panic never helps." The boy looked at him, stunned. "Thank you, sir." Samuel just smiled and turned back to his work, as if nothing had happened. Up on deck, the tension grew. The unidentified signal turned out to be harmless, a weather drone gone off course. But the fear had shaken everyone. Down in the galley, the crew whispered again. "Did you see how calm he was?" "Yeah, it's like he's seen worse." "Who is he, really?" That evening, as the ship sailed into the golden sunset, Samuel stood alone by the window, watching the waves. His reflection in the glass looked calm, but his eyes told a story of storms, battles, and loss. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn badge. It had one word engraved on it: Hammer 6. He looked at it quietly, then slipped it back into his pocket before anyone could see. Outside, the sea stretched endlessly, glowing under the dying light. The old cook took a deep breath, as if preparing for something. Whatever secret he carried, it was about to surface. And soon, the entire ship would know that the quiet old man, in the galley, was someone far greater than they ever imagined. The morning after the storm, the USS Falcon was calm again. The sun rose like gold fire over the horizon, painting the sea in shades of orange and blue. The crew went back to their usual routines: cleaning, checking systems, running drills. Everything seemed normal, but something had changed. The young sailors no longer joked loudly when the old cook, Samuel Briggs, walked by. They still didn't know who he really was, but there was something about him now, something that made them quiet down when he entered the room. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His calm presence said more than words ever could. In the galley, Samuel was preparing breakfast. The smell of coffee and fried eggs filled the air. A few sailors came in early to grab food, including Private Lewis, the youngest on the ship. Lewis liked to talk, especially when nervous. "Sir, Mr. Briggs," he said shyly. "How long have you been cooking?" Samuel smiled faintly without looking up. "Long enough to know a good pan before I touch it." Lewis chuckled awkwardly. "Were you always a cook in the Navy?" Samuel paused for a second. Then he nodded slowly. "More or less," he replied. "Sometimes I had other duties." Lewis frowned. "Other duties?" Before Samuel could answer, Chief Parker burst into the room. His voice was sharp as a knife. "Briggs, the captain wants the officer's meal ready in 10 minutes. Move faster!" Samuel didn't react to the harsh tone. He calmly flipped the eggs and plated the food with precision. Parker glared at him. "You always move this slow," the chief snapped. Samuel looked up at him quietly. "Rushing causes mistakes, Chief," he said softly. "And mistakes can cost lives." Parker stiffened. For a second, he didn't know what to say. There was something in the old man's voice, something heavy, something that came from experience. But instead of replying, Parker just grunted and walked out. Lewis stared at Samuel in silence. He had a strange feeling, as if this old man wasn't just a cook. That evening, the crew gathered for a routine drill, a security simulation meant to test their response to an onboard emergency. But this time, something went wrong. During the drill, the alarm blared suddenly, too loud, too real. The red lights flashed across the corridors. At first, everyone thought it was part of the exercise. But then came a voice over the intercom. "All stations, prepare for emergency lockdown. We have a malfunction in the engine room." The crew ran to their positions. Smoke began to rise from below deck. In the galley, Samuel looked up calmly as the others panicked. "Sir, we have to evacuate!" shouted Lewis. Samuel didn't move. He listened carefully, the way someone listens to the rhythm of danger. Then he said quietly, "That's not just an engine issue. That's a fire near the fuel line." "How do you know that?" Lewis asked, wide-eyed. Samuel didn't answer. He simply grabbed a fire extinguisher, pulled on a safety mask, and headed toward the engine room. The corridors were hot and full of smoke. Alarms screamed. Young sailors struggled to see through the haze. But Samuel moved through it like he'd done it 100 times before, quick, focused, unshaken. He found the source of the fire, a leaking pipe that had sparked near a power panel. A dangerous mix. "Stay back," he shouted to the others. The sailors froze. They didn't know whether to trust him or not. Then Samuel knelt by the valve and twisted it shut. 1, 2, 3 turns. His hands were steady, sure. The fire hissed and shrank. When it was safe, he stood up slowly, covered in soot. Who taught you that?" one of the sailors gasped. Samuel looked at him for a long moment, his eyes sharp under the flickering emergency light. "Let's just say," he murmured, "I've put out worse fires." Back in the control room, Captain Rains received the report. "Who contained the fire?" he asked. The officer hesitated. "Sir, it was the cook." "The cook?" "Yes, sir. Samuel Briggs. Samuel Briggs." The captain frowned. "Briggs! Briggs!" He tapped the table. "That name sounds familiar. Get me his personnel file." Moments later, the file appeared on the captain's screen. But it was strange. Half of the document was classified. Most of his service history was blacked out. The captain raised an eyebrow. "What kind of cook has a classified record?" He picked up the phone. "Chief Parker, bring Mr. Briggs to my quarters." Minutes later, Samuel stood in front of the captain, his uniform smudged with soot. Rains looked at him curiously. "You handled that fire like a trained officer," he said. "That's not something a galley worker usually knows how to do." Samuel stayed silent. The captain leaned forward. "Your record? It's sealed. You served before, didn't you?" "Not just as a cook." Samuel's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago, sir." Rains studied him. "Your file mentioned something. Hammer Unit, Pacific Division. That ring a bell?" For a brief moment, Samuel's calm expression faltered. His eyes darkened, just for a second. Then he straightened his posture. "With respect, sir," he said quietly. "Some call signs are better left in the past." The captain nodded slowly, realizing he wouldn't get more from him. "Very well, Mr. Briggs. Dismissed." As Samuel turned to leave, Rains muttered to himself, "Hammer. Hammer 6. Where have I heard that before?" That night, the crew couldn't stop talking. Word spread fast. The old cook had saved the ship from a fire. Some said he used to be a commander. Others said a spy. Others swore he was part of some secret Navy unit. In the mess hall, the young sailors whispered stories. "Maybe he's one of those Black Ops veterans," one said. "Nah, no way. He's too old. Still, you saw his eyes during the fire? That wasn't fear. That was training." Chief Parker overheard them. He didn't join in, but his face was pale. He had seen the way Samuel acted under pressure, and deep down, even he felt uneasy. Later, when the ship was quiet, Samuel stood alone on the deck. The stars stretched across the sky, bright and endless. The sea below was calm, reflecting the moonlight. He took out the small metal badge again, the one with the words Hammer 6 engraved on it. His hand trembled slightly as he held it. Memories came rushing back. The roar of jets, the sound of explosions, the faces of the men he once commanded. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You're still here, old man, but the ghosts never leave." Then from behind him, a voice said softly, "Sir, was that your call sign?" It was Lewis. Samuel turned around slowly. For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded once. Lewis's eyes widened. "You were Hammer 6? Samuel's gaze shifted toward the dark sea. "Once," he said. "A long time ago?" Before Lewis could say anything else, the old man walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the ship's corridor. The young sailor stood frozen, the waves crashing softly below. He now knew. The quiet old cook wasn't just a veteran. He was a legend. The next morning, the USS Falcon was cruising smoothly across the deep blue sea. The sunlight glistened on the waves, and the wind was calm again. But inside the ship, tension was quietly building. Everyone now knew the name Hammer 6. They whispered it in corners, repeated it in hushed tones, but no one dared ask the man himself. The cook, Samuel Briggs, continued his work as if nothing had changed. He chopped vegetables, stirred soup, cleaned his station, calm, steady, silent. But the looks he received were different now. Some were curious, some were respectful, and a few were nervous. Even Chief Parker, who once barked orders at him, now spoke carefully. "Breakfast looks good, Briggs," he said awkwardly. "Keep it up." Samuel only nodded. But something in his eyes had changed. They seemed distant, as if his mind was not in the galley anymore, but somewhere far away, somewhere he never wanted to return. Later that afternoon, Captain Rains stood in the command room with his officers. The ship had received a new message from Naval Command. He read it slowly, then frowned. "Unidentified vessel spotted 30 miles west of your location. Possibly a distress signal. Investigate immediately." Rains folded the paper. "Set course west. Full speed. Within minutes, alarms sounded and the ship turned sharply. The crew moved quickly into their positions, the deck filled with the sound of boots and engines. Down in the galley, Samuel felt the shift in movement. He looked up, listening to the faint echo of the intercom. He sighed quietly. "It never ends," he whispered. 2 hours later, the Falcon reached the signal's location, a small cargo ship floating aimlessly in the open water. Its radio was silent. No lights, no response. Raines ordered a small team to board it. "Check for survivors," he said. Chief Parker led the boarding crew. Among them was Private Lewis, still shaken from the night of the fire. They approached the dark vessel cautiously. The air was thick with the smell of oil and salt. When they stepped on deck, everything was silent, too silent. "Looks abandoned," Lewis said softly. "Stay alert," Parker warned. They moved deeper into the ship, flashlights cutting through the darkness. And then from the shadows, a noise. Metal scraped against metal. A whisper. Suddenly a loud bang echoed from below. The floor shuddered. "Get back to the boat," Parker yelled. But before they could retreat, the radio crackled with static. A voice broke through. "This is Hammer 6. All units, get clear. It's a trap." Back on the Falcon, Captain Raines froze. The voice came from his own ship's comms, but he hadn't given that order. "Who authorized that transmission?" he demanded. The radio operator's hands trembled. "Sir, it came from the galley." Raines's eyes widened. "Briggs," he grabbed the mic. "All units, retreat immediately. I repeat, retreat." Moments later, an explosion rocked the abandoned ship. Flames shot into the air, lighting up the ocean. The boarding crew barely escaped, their small transport boat tossed by the shockwave. When Parker and his team returned, shaken but alive, the captain stormed into the galley. Samuel was standing by the counter, calmly wiping his hands. Raines stared at him. "How did you know?" Samuel looked up slowly. "Because I've seen that trick before," he said quietly. "Pirates disguise distress signals. It's a lure." The captain stepped closer. "You recognize the pattern?" Samuel nodded once. "Same frequency they used during the Delta operations 12 years ago. They never changed their habits." The room fell silent. The crew around them looked confused, except the captain, whose face grew pale. "Delta operations," he whispered. "That was a black classified mission. Only one squad survived." Samuel turned away. "And that one squad doesn't sleep much anymore." After that day, respect for the old cook spread across the entire ship. Even those who once mocked him now spoke his name with admiration. But Samuel didn't enjoy the attention. The more people talked, the quieter he became. He spent his evenings alone on the deck, watching the horizon, lost in memory. Private Lewis often found excuses to talk to him, but Samuel rarely shared more than a few words. One evening, Lewis approached carefully, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Sir, Samuel, mind if I sit?" Samuel gave a faint smile. "You don't need permission, kid." Lewis sat beside him. The sea was calm, and the stars shimmered above. "People keep talking about Hammer 6, Lewis said. "They say you once led a rescue mission under heavy fire. That true?" Samuel didn't reply at first. Then softly he said, "We went in to save a trapped crew, but we weren't supposed to come back." Lewis frowned. "But you did." Samuel nodded. "Most of us did. Some didn't." He sipped his coffee, eyes still fixed on the dark water. "War takes more than lives, son. It takes silence too." The next morning, another storm rolled in, fiercer than the last. The sea turned violent, waves slamming against the ship's hull. Inside, systems began to flicker. Power dropped in sections of the ship. The communications tower was hit by lightning. The crew rushed to secure equipment. Captain Raines shouted orders, trying to keep the ship steady. Suddenly, a loud metallic crack echoed from the flight deck. "Captain," an officer yelled, "the port crane's cable snapped. It's heading straight for the fuel drums." If it hit, the entire deck would go up in flames. Without hesitation, Samuel ran out into the storm. Rain pounded his face, wind howled around him, but he didn't slow down. The crane arm was swinging dangerously, one cable hanging loose. "Sir, get back," a sailor screamed. But Samuel didn't listen. He grabbed a loose chain, climbed onto the railing, and reached for the control lever. His fingers gripped the cold metal, the wind almost tearing him off balance. He yanked the lever hard, locking the arm in place just as the cable snapped again, missing him by inches. The crew stared in disbelief as he stood there, drenched, lightning flashing behind him. For a moment, he looked like a figure from the past, the warrior he once was. Later, when the storm finally passed, the captain met him on the deck. "You saved this ship twice now." "Mr. Briggs," he said quietly, "but I need to know the truth. Who are you, really? Samuel looked out at the sea, the horizon glowing faintly under the morning sun. I was a pilot once, he said. Call sign Hammer 6, Special Operations. I lost my men in a mission that was never meant to happen. After that I left. Tried to live quietly. The captain was silent. Then he said softly, "The Navy doesn't forget its heroes." Samuel smiled sadly. Heroes? No, Captain. Heroes are the ones who didn't come back. He turned to leave, but the captain called out, "Mr. Briggs, if your call sign still echoes across the deck, it's because some legends never fade." Samuel paused, then walked away slowly, his silhouette fading into the light. The storm had passed, leaving the ocean quiet again. The USS Falcon floated under a soft golden dawn. The crew was tired but safe, because of one man. Down in the galley, Samuel Briggs was cleaning up, just like always. The same old apron, the same slow, steady rhythm. To any stranger, he looked like a simple cook, but to the crew, he was something else now. A mystery, a legend, a hero hidden in plain sight. Outside, the captain gathered the crew on deck. "Everyone, report to the main assembly," came the call over the loudspeakers. Samuel heard it but didn't move right away. He stared at the old metal tag resting beside his cup, the one engraved with Hammer 6. His fingers traced the letters gently, as if saying goodbye. Then quietly, he tucked it into his pocket and walked toward the deck. The entire crew stood at attention, lined up beneath the rising sun. Captain Rains faced them, his expression solemn but proud. "Crew of the Falcon," he began, his voice strong, "we owe our ship, and our lives, to one man who never asked for recognition." He looked toward Samuel. "Mr. Briggs, step forward." The old cook hesitated. Dozens of young faces turned toward him, waiting. Slowly, he stepped out of the line, the sea breeze catching his gray hair. "This man," the captain continued, "served in the shadows of history. He once led men under the call sign Hammer 6, a name that saved countless lives during a mission so dangerous it was erased from records." A quiet murmur ran through the ranks. The sailors who once laughed at him now stood silent, eyes wide, full of respect. "Today," Rains said, "we remember that service doesn't always wear a medal. Sometimes it cooks your meals, sometimes it fixes your mistakes, and sometimes it saves your life twice in a single week." The crew clapped slowly, then louder, until the entire deck echoed with applause. Samuel looked down, emotion tightening his chest. He had spent years trying to forget the name Hammer 6. But hearing it now, not in anger, not in grief, but in respect, brought peace he hadn't felt in years. Private Lewis stepped forward, saluting sharply. "Sir, it was an honor to serve beside you," he said. Samuel smiled faintly. "You didn't serve beside me, son," he said. "You're the new generation. You'll do better than we ever did." Lewis shook his head. "We just learned what true strength looks like." For a moment, Samuel couldn't speak. The sea wind brushed against his face, carrying with it memories of the past, his old team, the men he'd lost, the promise he made to live quietly for them. Now, standing among these young sailors, he finally felt that promise had meaning. Later that evening, as the sun sank into the sea, Samuel stood alone on the deck once more. The horizon burned with orange light. He took out the small metal tag, Hammer 6, and held it over the railing. "For the ones who never came back," he whispered. He let it fall into the ocean. It vanished beneath the waves, catching one last glimmer of sunlight before disappearing forever. A peaceful smile touched his face. From behind him, Captain Rains spoke softly. "Leaving it behind?" Samuel nodded. "It's time." The captain smiled faintly. "Then rest easy, Hammer 6. The Navy remembers." As Samuel walked back toward the ship's lights, the wind carried the faint sound of waves, soft, steady, almost like a whisper of the past. And for the first time in years, the legend of Hammer 6 was at peace.